Since the onset of the new BJP government, India has become what some would call the hotbed of communal tensions. The Indian media is accused to have communalized the discourse on coronavirus by blaming a particularly large Muslim contingent who were unfortunately trapped in Delhi as a part of a religious gathering. This is Arnab Goswami, the most polarizing figure in Indian media.
Good evening and welcome. The Tablighi Jamat Markaz of Nizamuddin in Delhi has become the biggest coronavirus super spreader.
Even regional channels are co-opting this method of brash and sensational reporting. To understand this situation in depth, Inter Cardiff spoke with Carol Andrade, a veteran of the Mumbai journalism scene, and Nikhil Kumar, former South Asia bureau chief for CNN and Time magazine.
So let me just talk about the time that it's absolutely true that in the time that I have been in India, I have seen growing concerns about the freedom of the press to do its job as it's meant to do, which is question things, report on whatever's in front of it, report it well, of course, do everything that good journalists are supposed to do without fear of getting on the wrong side of this or that government, and that's been a concern. And the other thing that has also been a concern is, the sometimes apparent, sometimes pretty marked bias on the part of particular Indian media outlets in favor of the ruling dispensation.
It has been proven that the Indian media, by and large, with a few notable exceptions, has been completely polarized and divided. And it is true that mainstream media has also become communal in its outlook. Look at the way they behaved over this Tablighi Jamat event that was held in mid-March, when after the event was held and it was discovered that some of them were actually COVID positive, mainstream media seemed to go off the deep end and began to sort of hound them and demonize them. And when this happens, you know what happens on social media in India. There are so many people just waiting to pick up these messages and amplify them. Look at the kind of coverage that we had. Look at the kind of so-called debates that you have on Indian television, where all they did was talk about how the COVID virus was now being referred to as the Tablighi virus.
There are examples even more recently, The Wire, which is, this small, relatively new online news portal set up over here by a whole bunch of journalists. One of their editors was served with a notice very recently after the Indian lockdown was introduced by a bunch of police personnel who drove in the midst of this lockdown all the way from Ayodhya in Uttar Pradesh state, which is India's largest state, which is next to Delhi, into Delhi to serve him this notice because they had received complaints from some people about certain things that were said in a Wire article, mistakenly said, I should add, in a Wire article attributing certain quotes to the Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh, who was an ally of Prime Minister Modi. But the Wire corrected that immediately. They issued a correction online. Yet, somehow, the police, in the midst of a lockdown, when everybody else, every other police man or woman that I've encountered is busy enforcing the lockdown, making sure that people stick to the rules that were introduced. Somehow, these officers found it useful to drive all the way to serve this notice upon him, which in the first instance required him to be present in the midst of the lockdown to explain himself in Ayodhya, which he couldn't have done. How could he have done that? And then, of course, that was revised later on. But it's things like that which are very, very worrying. All I can tell you is that look, there are there are a lot of people who know about the press in this country in more detail and with longer experience than me, far, far longer experience than me, and are much smarter about this. And these people say all the time that, these are not, instead of these are not, there's something larger going on here, which is that it is not simply, according to these experts, a question of allegiance to one particular party or politician or whatever. That there are, yes, it is true that, there are some peculiar characteristics of the press in this country, and one of them, as I pointed out earlier, is that, yeah, there are newspapers, for example, that are owned by people who also own large businesses, where, businesses that are vulnerable to political pressure. That's not to say that there aren't some really, really great journalists around. There are. There are some world-class journalists around, not some, many, many. And very often they're not around actually. They're not the people that you necessarily just encounter from Delhi or Bombay. You go out, the last few years, every time I've been outside to report on whatever I'm doing, as often happens, you meet journalists who are based in these cities, and you will meet some extraordinary people. Three of whom, for example, three photographers from one of the places in this country that's hardest to report from, Kashmir, who just won the Pulitzer Prize. And they're operating in sort of conditions that are very, very hard to operate. It's not easy to go out and report in these parts of the country, and these people do it, and they do a job, as good a job as anybody else, better than anybody.